Hi folks, welcome back to the Horde. Got charged batteries and everything. This is going to be the second in a series of troubleshooting a 1985 250 ES or SX, ATC250ES or SX, Big Red, or the sportier model. Round plug ignition system for a non-start condition where you have no spark. Obviously, if you have no carburetor, it doesn't matter if you have no spark, but no spark condition for this guy. Now what I've done is I've pulled out the round plug ignition system and I drew a picture of the plug that is sitting on the back of the wiring harness, right? Because I want to test it, so I need to be able to look at the plug on the harness. Then I went through the trouble of decoding each wire color on there, right, and where it sits from a location point of view on the plug. Not all that hard to do, right? A little bit of drawing does it. And what this thing here is, and that thing, this is the little clip that grabs it on the plug, and this is the little, I guess I'd call it a keyway on the plug, right? You could see on this guy, right, this thing sticks out. To take this off, by the way, you push this up and it should slide off fairly easily. Some of them do, some of them don't. So you push this up, slide it off. You see this one actually has the key to it. On the plug, right, you have the keyway, and this is a little piece of plastic, that guy, that this thing grabs onto, right? You can kind of see in there. Then what I did, not hard guys, I hooked one of my meter wires to ground, right, and the second meter wire I put a little probe into it and probed around the plug. And you can see I wrote the readings here, like between engine ground, right? See how that goes to engine ground. And the blue-white wire, I know that's the pulse generator. I got 340 ohms. I went between the black and yellow wire, which I know is the ignition coil, and I got 0.3 ohms. By the way, when I zeroed the meter out, when I basically put the leads together, I was getting like 0.2, 0.3 ohms with this meter. The meter isn't perfect. It doesn't give you an absolute, it doesn't take into account your lead resistance and your contact resistance and all that. So when I actually got this reading, it was actually like 0.5, 0.6. But obviously if I got 0.3 ohms in the leads, you subtract that from 0.5, 0.6, and you get the 0.3 I have there. Anyway, black-red, which is the AC power from the stator, I checked that to ground and got 320 ohms. The black-white, which is the on and off switch, when the bike is on, I get infinity or overload on the meter, and when it's off, basically the meter should not read anything. And by the way, if you're hanging on to the leads and you have an auto ranging meter, you're going to get some numbers. You really want to let go of the leads, kind of have a little metal probe here that you kind of push into the connector and stop touching it. But once again, with this on, I get infinity ohms, and with it on off I get about 2 ohms. The green wire that goes to the connector is ground, and I get about 0.1 ohms. So for the whole wire harness and all, it adds about another ohm of resistance. And the black-red wire is the key switch, on, off. And when the key is on, you get about infinity, and when it's off, you get between 5 and 50 ohms, you know, depending on how you jiggle the key a little bit here. So, what I've just told you about is for 1985 Honda 250 ES SX. CDI round plug, ignition system measurements to engine case ground, and I put them all there in a nice little chart for you. These are the things you need to test first. Assuming all this stuff is happy, right, that everything is in on condition and you have those infinity ohms for your green and red and black and white, right, this switch and this switch, your CDI should be relatively happy, right? But does this mean your CDI is good? No, you haven't tested it. There are, if you go to the Honda manual, there are some ways of poking around between this pin and that pin and getting some readings. I've had no luck with that. So, just to let you know, I have a few of these bikes around, and I've worked on a few of these. I have yet to get a bad one of these. I've never had a bad CDI. Over the years, I've had a few bad coils, and the bad thing about a coil is a lot of times, especially given that real low ohm value, which is the black-yellow 0.3, you can kind of see that and go, oh, my coil's good. Well, maybe your primary of your coil is good, or maybe your coil has your black-white lead has some kind of short here to ground or something like that. So you got to be a little careful about that. These coils are relatively cheap, right? They're not too bad, not heavily expensive. So that's not too bad to change out. Lastly, so you've gone through all this testing, and you know you're relatively sure that it's not your coil. I've had some people test these coils, by the way, by putting a spark plug on them, you know, making sure the case of the spark plug is grounded, right, putting the lead on the spark plug, and then between ground and the, you know, hot lead on the coil, so to speak here, using a 9-volt battery, you know, those things we used to use for transistor radios back in the day, where they kind of touch it very quickly, and they can test their coils that way. I personally don't recommend it, because even for a 9-volt battery, you're kind of slamming a lot of current through there, and you could take a functional coil and turn it into a non-functional coil, and then back, you know, oh look, it sparked. Well, it sparked the one time with the 9-volt battery as you were killing it, and then, but I've heard people suggest that. I have used that technique. I have not burned up a coil using that technique, but I'm a little suspicious, especially if you have a real fresh, strong, you know, battery with very, very low internal resistance. When you do that testing, you're kind of slamming on the coil pretty good. You know, it might, you know, pay to put some kind of anyway, you know what, I've seen people do it successfully. I've done it successfully without breaking anything, but I'm concerned about doing it, and I'm concerned about telling somebody who this is the first time troubleshooting their bike to do it, because if you kill your coil, now you got two problems: the reason why it won't start, and the coil you just killed with the 9-volt battery. Let me just stop there. That's the easiest way. The next thing I'm going to try to do with this, and I don't see any reason why it shouldn't work, I'm going to try hacking a square plug pit bike CDI system into this bike and starting it up with that, and then I'm going to say, hey, why should you spend all the time and effort and money trying to track down a round plug, a used round plug CDI, and not, you know, maybe it's your problem, maybe it's not your problem. So this is kind of something I would do. I'll show you how I'm going to do it, and then we'll go on from there. Anyway, folks, I hope you enjoyed this video. I want to thank you all for watching and commenting and subscribing. Remember to keep your feet down, keep your heads up, and get out there and enjoy all your days. Bye now, folks.